please rise and join us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moines County Board of Supervisors, November 17th, 2020. Can everybody hear me? If you can't, I can. Do I have any problem hearing me? Okay. If anybody online can't hear me, give us a call or email. I will remove this mask long enough to talk. Okay. Do we have any changes to the tentative agenda? We have an agenda. The department heads, elected officials. Terry Johnson, Des Moines County Auditor.
Good morning. Last Thursday, we finished our post-election audit. Right now, the recount board got 2 members. They're deciding on their 3rd member. And so as soon as I get information from them, we'll find out when we start the recount of all over 20,000 ballots. And we're just still trying to get stuff done from the election, cleaning stuff up and getting other projects done that need to be done for that. And then I also want to comment about, we need to put out an ad for a Veterans Affairs Director. I sent everybody a job description the other day for that, and so I just need everybody to review that. And then I also sent it to Bob Housewright so that he'd give it to his board to review that, so we can get that posted and find a replacement before the end of the year. So, and still need to work on the ordinance updates and try to catch up with some of the stuff that was kind of put on hold during the election. So that's it.
I looked at that, it looked fine to me, I didn't respond, but Colin Gerst, IT.
Just keeping busy. Got me and the rest of the guys back in the office here, so we're trying to get caught back up and try to work on everything that we can, and we're back in the office now, so.
Is your wife forgiving you yet?
She's getting there. She's getting there.
Sticking her with the children.
Yep. She's still kind of stuck home today with them because of the 2 weeks after the 10-day isolation, so the girl's got to stay home until the 1st of December, so she's still roughing it a bit.
Brian Carter, Secondary Roads.
Good morning. Things are moving along good. Obviously, weather's been good. Hopefully pouring a slab up at our shop site tomorrow. And we took some bids. I have a report for that, for the building itself. So I'll report that later. I want to note that we do have bid packets out for the Flint Bottom paving project. Those will be bids that we'll take in December. Second Tuesday, I want to say off the top of my head, but so that's a local bid. So we're working towards that. And the Highway 99 bridge, Flint Creek Bridge, is coming along very well. Had good weather and they've made good use of it. We were talking about that this morning, and the bridge is gone. And actually they were working on getting rid of the last old pier yesterday. So made a lot of headway, and I'm glad to see it. Water's down, good weather, and that's what you want to see, and they're making good use of it. So
Good. Thanks, Brian.
good.
Jared Lassiter, Land Use.
Good morning. Nothing really. I think we have a item on the agenda plus the work session, so I think I'll just keep it brief here. I think we've been, it's kind of a quieter part of the year generally than it's been earlier this year, although we've had a few more inquiries since the election, so nothing else to report.
Thank you, Jared. Matt, you've got a
Yeah, just on the agenda item today.
agenda item, okay. Sheriff-elect Kevin Glendenning.
Things are going really well at the sheriff's office. We're in the final stages of our hiring process. We'll have 2 new hires probably to present to you towards the end of December, and hopefully be ready to start the academy in January. But other than that, nothing major to report.
Good. Lisa Schaefer, Des Moines County Attorney.
As you may be aware, jury trials have been suspended again to February 1. So we'll just continue to manage the backlog. We're working with Doug and Coulter at the jail to see who we can get out on pretrial release or whose cases we can resolve fairly quickly to get them out of the jail and either someplace more or less hospitable, or if we're gonna get them on probation or into some sort of community-based situation. So that leaves us time to be working on some other projects as well. The CarPal system is in. We are working out bugs. Sometimes it just is a reminder to the staff that no, it's not the old system, it's the new system. And so yes, we're working out bugs. But overall, I think we're really, really gonna like it. It's gonna make things just a lot easier. And then after the first of the year, we're gonna start actually going paperless once we can trust that we've got some of the bugs worked out. And then we continue to work on our courtroom AV project. We did put in a grant. And I know I've worked out with Judge Brown. Apparently the state also has some grant money. So we have a plan. So whoever gets their money or doesn't get their money, we have backup plans to make sure that we can get the third floor courtroom up to speed for just generally being in the 21st century, but as well as being able to accommodate COVID restrictions. I know I did a trial a couple of weeks ago, and it is really limiting, especially if you have significant video or photographic evidence. It's just laid out poorly, and it's very hard to continue to do everything you need to do and then make sure all 12 to 14 jurors can actually see everything you're trying to tell them. So we're excited, hopefully we should know December 15th I think on our grant. And then we are ready to get the ball rolling. So that is an advantage to jury trials being suspended. It'll give us some time to get that up and going.
Silver lining.
Yeah, I always try to look for one.
So the bugs that are in your system, is that getting used to it, or is it?
A little bit of both. I think there were obviously some things that we liked in the old system that we're trying to figure out if the new system can do it that way. But I think the bulk of it is just actually people, again, old dogs, new tricks. You know, this is a system we've had since 2008. And this system really was just kind of an upgrade from the system they'd had for the 10 years before that. So we're actually asking staff who've been there and worked with this one system for 20 plus years to try to do things very, very differently now. So, you know, it's a work in progress.
Yeah, I understand, being a lousy computer man.
We could loan you Bob for a couple weeks and knock out some of the technical issues.
A lot of it is just, you know, getting used to the steps that they did in dialogue, and then just now there may be an additional step here and there. I think a lot of it is just truly getting used to it, which is why we didn't want to start using some of the features like getting the videos downloaded through CarPal from law enforcement. We decided to wait on that because we simply knew for the first couple of months it was us getting used to it, working out some technical glitches, which we've had, and getting us ready for the next wave of getting all the information, reports, everything will now start coming in online through the cloud. So we figured we'd go through step one, get through phase one without killing each other. There have been a few tense moments. A few tense moments when one person doesn't like the way the system works and then their counterpart loves the way it works, and then trying to get everybody to compromise that, okay, let's just do it this way. And then discovery is going, I think then the next phase will be convincing some of our more set in their ways defense attorneys. We just have the feeling we're gonna get some backlash from a couple people when we explain to them that they're gonna have to get all of their discovery online. Some of them have already said, it's great, I can't wait till you get it started. And then we have a couple of others who I'm not even sure know how to turn on their computers, let alone get their discovery that way. So we just know it's gonna be a work in progress, probably for the next 6 months or so. But so far, I love it, now that I'm getting used to it. It's just, it's taking getting used to.
You've reinforced all my suspicions about working in an office full of lawyers. Thank you, Lisa. Doug Irvine, Correctional Center.
Good morning. Everything's going pretty good out there. We're extremely busy. Our population's back up to 94 this morning. So we are farming out quite a few, I think 17. I believe 6 are waiting to go to prison, with 4 waiting to go to the residential facility. That's been, actually, the state came up with a process that's working still. It just goes good for a while, and then the prison stop taking people, and so it's a fine balance there. But they are taking people at this time, it's gotten slower. Still testing everybody for COVID testing before we go to any other facility. And with the courts being on hold till February 1st, gonna slow down the whole system even more. So we're working hard trying to find beds. The courts and the county attorney's office is working great with us on trying to do the same thing. They understand the problems there, but just the solutions are a little bit more difficult to make happen. We also been staying busy. We did have our state jail inspection. That was done virtually, which just meant he didn't come here in person and tour around the jail. We did video a lot of it for him, got him all the correct information, and that inspection came out just fine. Had all the documents and everything he needed, so we was busy on that. And the only other thing is agenda item that I'll explain when we come to that.
Thank you, Doug.
Yeah.
Krista Poggemiller, Public Health.
Good morning. We obviously continue to be very busy with contact tracing at our office. The current 14-day rolling percentage of activity is 21.6, which is actually down. So we are seeing that slow down just a little bit. Our current positive cases since the beginning is 2,383, with 1,270 that have recovered. Recently, just beginning of last week, the state announced that they were going to change their contact tracing due to the fact that we have so many cases throughout the state. It was, for all of us, local health as well as the state doing their contact tracing, impossible to keep up, because what we are finding is if we would call someone, they would have a number of outside of the home contacts, and it could be a very long list. So they switched to where they're only doing household contact tracing. A majority of their cases, they said over 70% of the infections were actually linked to household infections anyway. So that seemed to be a majority of the infectious or transmitting it to someone else. So we have also started to do the same to try and get cases caught up, because we were just getting so many cases every day. It was impossible. We just didn't have the resources. But we do encourage people, if you've tested positive for COVID and someone, reach out to the people that you've been close to and in close contact with. That's anyone within 6 feet for a duration of 15 minutes. And let them know that you're positive, and those people just need to take the appropriate measures, staying home for 14 days since their last contact with a positive person. Governor Reynolds obviously put out an enhanced public health measures yesterday, and those became effective at 12:01 last night. And again, trying to flatten that curve, even our region is having some challenges with having enough hospital beds and ICU type of beds. I think that continues to be a concern, and so they talked about now obviously a mask mandate for anyone who's going to be anywhere where they're within 6 feet of someone for a duration of 15 minutes, and they're limiting social gatherings for no more than 15 people indoors and 30 people outside. Recreational events for the youth, adult, sporting and recreational gatherings are prohibited except for high school, college, and professional sports. High school and sports and extracurricular sporting, only 2 spectators permitted for each high school athletic performer or person in competition must wear a mask and maintain 6 feet from other spectators. Students can be no closer than 6 feet and are required to wear masks. Bars and restaurants are closed in person services at 10 p.m. And then fitness groups, group activities are prohibited. Casinos and gaming facilities, masks required except when seated to eat or drink. closure or prolonged contact establishments, and they call those bowling alleys, pool halls, bingo halls, arcades, indoor playgrounds, children's play centers, closed in-person services at 10, and they must be masked whenever, masked when required when not seated, ensure groups are, and individuals are 6 feet apart. And then non-essential and elective surgeries, they're reducing those to, non-essential surgeries to a level that uses at least 50% fewer beds than it did in the average of September 2020, trying to provide more spaces to accommodate obviously the increased number of COVID cases. And other than that, I have an agenda item from the Board of Health.
It helped when they took off that, 115 or 120 positives they had on the second, when those rotated off the 14-day average.
Yes.
Another week to get off the ninth, what was that, 144? Something like that.
Yeah. Well, and today, I have to tell you, today is the first day that our list wasn't, I think we're down to 3 pages today. I think yesterday's we were at 8 pages. There are just so many of these coming in so fast that we couldn't hardly keep up with them. So we're doing all we can. All of our nurses are pretty much contact tracing at this point in time to try and get caught up. Because you're right, 144, 150 cases, that's a lot of cases.
So if, is Jim immune, he won't get it again?
So there's a presumption of antibodies for 90 days from the time that you have COVID. And so the recommendation is if you're exposed to a close contact, not wearing masks within 90 days from the day that you tested positive, it's presumed you have antibodies. However, if in that 90-day time frame you become sick again, become symptomatic, they want you to quarantine just like you hadn't had it. And then obviously if you have a high-risk symptom, one of the high risk or 2 of the low-risk symptoms, then you need to quarantine and be tested. Obviously, if you test negative, then symptoms are something else, or if a doctor diagnoses something else. But the presumption is anyone who's symptomatic, we're going to presume that it's COVID until we rule that out, even the folks who've had it.
I think one of the worst treatments that I got at the hospital, when I was in the hospital, when they come and give you that shot in the belly. That is painful.
I'm sure.
I don't know what it was for, but.
Rabies.
Could have been.
Need that once a month from here on out.
Yeah.
Thank you, Krista.
You're welcome.
You got anybody online?
I have 3 on here. The first one I have on here is Rodney Bleasner, Des Moines County Maintenance.
Rodney Bleasner, maintenance.
He's on mute.
You're on mute, Rodney.
I'll come back.
There you
Oh,
go.
there.
Hi. Good morning. Sorry about that. We're just staying busy. Got a lot of stuff going on, trying to prepare for the winter months ahead, but I have nothing new to add at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodney.
Chris Lee, Des Moines County Conservation.
Chris Lee, Conservation.
Good morning. Not a whole lot to report today. We do still have a couple campers up here at Big Hollow, really sticking it out through the winter months. I guess it's really not that cold though, honestly. This is pretty good camping weather when you really get down to it. All of our parks are closed up except for Big Hollow. We are going to start slowly closing things up here today. Start picking up some of the tables, and we'll leave the water on to the sites, at least for a little while. If it looks like we're going to get a sustained freeze, that's when we'll shut that off, but the shower house has been off for a while. And we still seem to be getting some activity up here, so we'll keep going with it, just kind of play it by ear. We have kind of transitioned our staff. We've got our Nature Center staff helping out with some field work. One, due to the Nature Center being closed, thanks to the coronavirus, but also we're a couple staff down, and so they're kind of filling in for that. River's coming up a little bit, and so the team's out right now pulling the docks up. We will leave the boat docks out I know we get a lot of requests from the duck hunters and late season boaters to leave those out as long as we can. And we will leave those out until it looks like we're gonna risk some ice on the river, at which point we'll get those pulled out. We don't wanna risk our staff trying to pull those out when there's ice out there. We've done that before, and that's not a fun thing, so. Otherwise, just kind of keeping things maintained and kind of like Rodney getting transitioned into winter mode and going from there. So that's it for today.
Thanks, Chris.
Janelle Nelly Longquist, Des Moines County Treasurer.
Janelle Nally Longquist, Des Moines County Treasurer.
Keep the money.
Janelle, are you there?
Took it off of you.
We can't hear you, Janelle. Is your local phone muted? Well, I'm not sure what's going on with Janelle.
Janelle, whenever you get that straightened around, feel free to barge in. That's everybody.
That is everyone, sorry.
COVID-19, I believe Chris has addressed that. Correspondence.
I have none.
I have none. I have none. Proceed to discussion and vote. We have accounts payable in the amount of $1,868,243.97.
Move to approve.
Second. Terry?
Jim Carrey,
Yes.
Bob Beck,
Yes.
Tom Broker.
Yes. I don't have any payroll claims reimbursement.
Okay, yeah, we might not have those, so
Okay.
those might have to wait.
Okay.
Janelle says she has nothing to report.
Thanks, Janelle. Chris, I believe this is you. It's Des Moines County Public Health State of Iowa Board of Health Directive.
Yes. So a few weeks back, the Des Moines County Board of Health did a position statement on large gatherings, encouraging people to really consider not having large gatherings or large events, or advising the community not to attend those if they feel the social distancing and proper mitigation can't be done to protect their safety. Well, as the weeks have gone on and our numbers have gotten more, when the Board of Health met last week, they decided they wanted to put together a directive, a little stronger than a position statement. So would it be okay if I read this?
Please do.
So Des Moines County Board of Health, State of Iowa Board of Health Directive. Whereas the mission statement of Des Moines County Public Health is to protect and promote the health of all residents of Des Moines County. And whereas the novel coronavirus SARS-CoV-2, also referred to as COVID-19, is a virus that is highly contagious and primarily spreads from person to person and can result in a serious illness, long-term negative health impacts of deaths. Whereas the number of COVID-19 positive cases in Des Moines County and the state is steadily increasing at a rapid rate, posing an immediate threat to public health of Des Moines County residents and visitors, potentially overwhelming the ability of the healthcare system to provide adequate care to those affected. And whereas there is currently no treatment that is curative for this virus, and there's evidence on how transmission occurs, and there's evidence on the effectiveness of public health measures to ensure that reduce the spread of the virus. Now therefore, the Des Moines County Board of Health is therefore directing all citizens of Des Moines County to adopt the following public health measures. Social distancing, limit the number of interactions you have with people from outside your household on a daily basis. Avoid all gatherings of people. Many recommendations specify a large gathering is more than 10 people. The more people that are in one place at a time, the more risk there is for everyone involved. Stay home if you are sick. Contact Des Moines County Public Health with the telephone number 319-753-8290 or healthcare provider for advice on how long to isolate. Let's see, hygiene. Wash your hands Use hand sanitizer, disinfect surfaces appropriately, face coverings, mask use, wear an appropriate face covering every time you leave your home and when you might be within 6 feet of someone from outside of your household. The purpose of face covering is to protect yourself and others. If you find yourself in a place where other people are not wearing face coverings appropriately, you are at great risk. You should consider leaving or avoiding that place altogether. Exceptions to face covering or mask wearing are children less than 2 years of age or individuals with a legitimate medical condition that would preclude them from wearing a face covering. However, it's anticipated the majority of people in our community can wear a face covering, and 100% usage in public is expected to get maximum benefits from this measure. These are fundamental principles of public health for decreasing the transmission of COVID-19 virus. During this pandemic, Des Moines County Public Health asks each citizen of Des Moines County to immediately comply with these directives to slow the transmission. It was adopted by the Des Moines County Board of Health on November 12th and was signed by the chairman of the board, Matthew Shivers. And obviously, this is very similar to what the governor put in place yesterday. But not knowing that proclamation was coming, they wanted to make sure that they brought that directive to the community.
Thank you, Krista.
Thank you.
Questions? And I see those, it says 2 years old and over. I have a grandson that'll be 2 in about a month. I haven't seen, but I see him on FaceTime or something like that. I'm not sure that you could put something on him and it would stay there. That's kind of aspirational at that age, isn't it?
I think it's definitely with children, anytime you have to monitor kids at that age anyway, but I would be very careful. If you're taking the child out in public and making sure that you, when you do put a face covering on, that they monitor that very closely, because you could easily get that in them. And I think that's the reason they put out that guidance. That guidance comes from the CDC. But as a parent, I would definitely, if I was putting a face mask on a 2-year-old, I would definitely keep a very close eye.
Thank you. Resolution for final plat of the Diane Gabe Line subdivision. This, I'm guessing, would be you, Jared?
Yep. As it's been lately, it seems like every other week it's an unusual, interesting name, and then the week after that it's ordinary in comparison. So this is no exception there. This one is simply the name of the person that owns the land right now. So we're out in Pleasant Grove Township off Danville Road. Diane and her husband own land on both sides of Danville Road, and they currently reside in a house on the east side. And the intention of this subdivision is to split up the land they own across the street so that each of their 2 children will have a lot on which to build their own house. So lot 1 of this subdivision would be for one of those houses, and then the other one would be built on what was left of the parcel it's being carved out of. So lot 1 is just under 12 acres. It's laid out so that there will be a shared access easement off of Danville Road. The second page of the plat goes into the easement in detail. The actual lot line itself follows the center line of the existing driveway entrance from Danville, but the easement will be on both sides, so that ensures that in the future, if that ever changes, so that someone other than members of that family owns one or both of those lots, that access will continue to be preserved in the future. One slight complication with this subdivision is that there is a lot just to the north that has up until now been using a driveway easement through the Gable Lines property, and that's based on an easement agreement from when they purchased that ground back in the 90s. And the way it's written, it applies to, it doesn't specify the exact geographic location, rather it merely states that the owners of the property to the north have the right to use the driveway through the Gable Lines property. So that would allow for, conceivably, that driveway could be moved to a different location, and then the easement would still be effective. So it's my understanding that they've both neighboring property owners and the Secondary Roads Department have been involved in plans to relocate that driveway so that the new house would be built in that area in the near future. But since it's still hasn't been completely finished yet. We've just to make sure that this is addressed in the approval of the subdivision, we've included a condition on the resolution that the owner and developer of Lot 1 shall not cause parcel A to be deprived of access to Danville Road, and shall either maintain the existing driveway access easement or relocate it to another part of Lot 1 or onto parcel A itself. So that just covers the different options available there and ensures that that access will be preserved going forward. Apart from that, we also included pretty much our standard resolution whenever a home is proposed and a septic system has not been, a permit has not yet been filed for a septic system. So that's our standard resolution there, that a permit will need to be filed for a septic system before the home is built, and then it needs to be installed before the home is occupied. That's all we received in terms of comments, other than secondary roads, that he'd be continue using that access for Lot 1, and then the remainder of the property to the west. So we would recommend approval of Gable Line subdivision with those two conditions.
So moved.
Thank you, Chuck.
Second.
Terry?
Bob Beck,
Yes.
Jim Carrey.
Yes.
Tom Broker.
Yes. We'll get these signed after the meeting, right, Jerry? We have an agreement with Prodigy Solutions, amended agreement. I think this is probably Doug.
It is. Prodigy is our service for our phones, inmate phones, I should say, as well as our video visitation. This amendment is due to a state regulation where the most that a Prodigy can charge an inmate for a phone call has reduced to 21 cents per minute. This is statewide, so therefore it's going to go from 30 cents as they were charging to 21 cents. Also, as part of that amended agreement, we were making 50% of the revenue at 30 cents per minute. Now it's going to drop to 21 cents per minute. However, we're going to make 55% of the revenue. So it's an amendment that really has got to take place, as it's a statewide fee change.
Thank you, Doug.
And nothing else has changed with the video visitation. That's at 35 cents per minute, and we're collecting 20% of that revenue, just because there's more expenses incurred with that through Prodigy Solutions.
Move approved.
Second.
Terry?
Jim Carrey.
Yes.
Bob Beck,
Yes.
Tom Broker.
Yes. We have a Conservation Board reappointment. This letter is to express my interest in serving a full term on the Des Moines County Conservation Board starting January 2021. My time on the board filling out a term has been exciting, rewarding, and I hope useful to the citizens of this great county. I have a passion for preserving and making available to people the wonder of our natural resources. Thank you for your consideration in this matter. Julie Selinsky.
I move to appoint.
Second.
Terry?
Bob Beck,
Yes.
Jim Carrey.
Yes.
Tom Broker.
Yes. And we have an application for family farm tax credit that I believe Mr. Warner, the assessor, can
Yeah, it's just basically a recommendation for denial on that application. The reason being, the family farm credit has to be farm owned by the family and farmed by the family. In this instance, the property is actually cash rented by somebody outside the family. So, property owner, we made him aware of that stipulation, and so he still had an application filed. So, just make a recommendation to deny it based on the fact that it's being cash rented to somebody outside the family. And the reason we're doing it now, the deadline for those is November 1st. It's kind of a different time frame than some of the other credits.
Then we need a motion to refuse or deny this application.
Yes.
So you're saying that these people rent this, so they're not eligible to get a farm tax credit because it's a rented ground?
Correct.
They're not family?
Those are the kids of the previous owner.
Yeah. Yeah, but it has to be farmed by the family to receive that credit. That's just the
Sure,
code
I
bylaw.
have to live with it.
I don't understand it, I hate
I'll make a motion that it be denied.
it's the way the code reads, the Iowa code
to.
reads.
It is in the code.
Yeah, but I referenced that in the letter that it's saying, and I referenced that code section.
I don't understand why Dad didn't do it before he died.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the specifics of that situation.
Second that, then.
Terry?
Bob Beck,
Yes.
Jim Carrey,
Yes.
Tom Broker.
Yes. We have bid results for the Minneapolis Secondary Road District Shop. That would be Mr. Carter.
So as I mentioned earlier, yesterday we took bids for the shop site on Iowa City Road. We've been slowly working toward this for a long while. In fact, we bid this, a month and a half ago and didn't get any bids, so we had to extend the completion time frame. We had just been too tight on our time frame from what we were told, and that appears to be accurate because we did receive 3 bids. Spectra Build out of Wapello was the low bidder at $225,690. And then 2 other bids. Second bid was Myers Construction, $297,041. And I'm happy to run a copy of those numbers for media if they'd like to have that instead of trying to follow. Then S&G Construction was third at $298,255. So competitive bids. Happy with the numbers. I think it certainly fits the budget we had, and so we'll work on a contract with Spectra and move on. So, and just a reminder, the concrete work is what I was talking about too. That was a separate bid, and they're actually getting ready to finish that up hopefully this week for this project. So,
Thank you, Brian.
yep.
Approved?
We just approved the contract.
I'm just reporting the bids. I don't have anything else. I just wanted to get it out there for public consumption, I guess, so.
We have a recount request for the 2020 general election from the Rita Hart for Congress campaign. It's Dear Commissioner Johnson, please accept this letter and the attached recount request form as my request for a recount in the election for Iowa's 2nd Congressional District. I am not including a bond with this request because the abstract prepared by the County Board of Supervisors show that the difference in the number of votes counted for me as compared to my opponent are below the number percentage specified in the Iowa code for which bond is required. I intend for the recount to be conducted in full compliance with all code guidelines so that we can protect the health and safety of our friends, neighbors, and public servants. I will see that anyone who has been exposed to COVID within the past 14 days or showing signs of illness does not participate on my behalf, and I will direct my representatives to wear masks. I would respectfully ask that your office see that others take these same steps. Also, my campaign would be glad to discuss these matters or any other details relating to your account, your convenience. Does this need to be approved, or we just accept it?
By motion.
Okay. We need a motion to approve this.
So moved.
Second?
Terry?
Bob Beck,
Yes.
Jim Carrey,
Yes.
Tom Broker.
Yes.
Now that, you don't know for sure if it's gonna be hand counted or through the machine?
No, that's up to the recount board to decide if they want a hand count, machine count, or both. And I don't know the exact dates yet, exactly when they're gonna do the recount.
Okay, we have personnel actions. We have one for conservation. Tanner Gebhardt, a seasonal conservation tech, a new hire starting on or after November 23rd and ending before January 31st at $12 an hour.
Second.
Terry?
Jim Carrey,
Yes.
Bob Beck,
Yes.
Tom Broker.
Yes. We have a correctional center personnel action for Russell Egan, an assistant cook, a new hire at $8.84 an hour.
Move to approve.
Second?
Terry?
Bob Beck,
Yes.
Jim Carrey,
Yes.
Tom Broker.
Yes.
Just a little further insight on that. We are putting him as a assistant until he completes school here in, he said over the Christmas break, he would have his credits, and we'd put him as a cook. That's what we're interested in hiring.
Okay. Thank you, Doug. We have the clerk's report of fees collected for October 2020 and the recorder's report of fees collected for October 2020. Both of these reports will be on file and available for public review at the auditor's office. We have minutes for the regular meeting of November 10th, 2020.
Move to approve?
Second.
Terry?
Jim Carrey,
Yes.
Bob Beck,
Yes.
Tom Broker.
Yes. Any other business?
Have none?
Have none.
Future agenda items? We've still got that magistrate nomination committee to contact, move on that before the end of the year. Committee reports.
Have none.
Had a meeting last night, Mississippi Valley Workforce. Region 9, the old Region 9, which has been up north, Clinton, West King, Scott County and them. And Region 16, which would have been our region down here, had MOUs with our providers, and that expires the 1st of December. And the state hasn't got their end of the bargain held up yet, so we voted last night to extend that until June the 30th to give the state time to get their stuff together. So that's all I've got.
I attended a meeting of the Southeast Iowa Link Mental Health and Disability Services region, and we, regular meeting, we approved claims, and we also approved the annual report. That's all I had. Public input. If anybody from the public would like to address the board in light of the current lack of seating, You may email the Board of Supervisors at board@dmcounty.com. That's BOARD@dmcounty.com. Or call 319-753-8203, extension 4. That's 319-753-8203, extension 4. We'll give you 2 minutes to make that call or send an email. Anybody in the room have any public comment? Really? Let the record show.
Terry, the Rita Hart letter, did she deliver it?
No.
It says delivered by hand, and it looks like she typed it. Because there's no secretarial initials. I'm just curious.
No, they don't have to hand deliver it themselves. It has to be hand delivered, but it doesn't have to be themselves. So they had a.
When do they
assistant.
decide whether they want to, until they meet, and they haven't all chosen, because they have to come up with a third
They
person?
have to come up with a third person. And if they can't come up with a third person, then the district chief judge determines who that third person is.
What's the margin? What's the margins on that vote?
40-something, isn't it now? Or it was when they called for the recount, I believe.
I don't know for sure what it is statewide.
40-something, because I think I read it in the paper. I don't remember. It was something like that. Pretty close. Because there's close to 400,000 votes, I believe, altogether. When do they have to meet?
Do the count, then you guys would have to have a special meeting to accept the new canvas numbers. If they don't change, then we don't have to worry about changing anything. So there's still a lot of ifs out there.
Thank you, Terry. It's 2 minutes. With an aye, we're adjourned.
Aye.
We're adjourned. We have a work session following the meeting. Are we still having this?
Yeah.
Sure, okay.
Zach is outside right now.
Y'all have a great day.
addressed just as a use for an individual home, but the question then becomes, what about larger scale solar developments or wind developments where it might be on a mass scale? There's one that is going up in Wise County just across the border. We got a phone call from Henry County recently that they have a wind farm that is looking kind of in the northeast portion of the county, right along the Des Moines County border, and he was just reaching out to us to see if they've contacted us, and actually that company that he referenced did contact us earlier this year, and just asking about what regulations and ordinances we have in place. And then just a week or two ago, I got a phone call from a consulting firm asking about regulations for solar farms and solar panels and what kinds of things we have in place. So I don't know of anything that's happening, but we've been getting phone calls about it. You know, we've had some of the instances on the small scale for single individual homes, but nothing necessarily on the bigger scale for these larger developments. But I guess the question then that we're wondering is this something that we should address in the 2-mile zoning ordinance for these larger scale developments? Or likely if those were to happen, they're probably gonna be outside the 2-mile boundary. Is that something that we should try to address ahead of time?
You're
Things like
talking,
that.
the ones when you mentioned, the ones on individual houses, are you talking about the ones in the 2-mile zone?
Yes, those are ones that we've gotten phone calls about or permits for. I think we've only had 2 maybe.
Actually, only had, it was the
Oh, the
same,
one didn't-
the same
the one didn't
company, and the
actually
one
go in.
didn't actually build it. It was just one of 2 that they actually went ahead with.
But I think the small ones, we can address just as like listing it as an accessory use. So that we know what
The
is
question
setback
there is
is.
that if, initially we were thinking of just doing that, but if you start introducing terminology about those types of infrastructure, it seems like that's, if we're gonna take the time to do that at all, maybe it makes more sense to just address every application, especially when you are actually getting inquiries about that out there from companies that are, it's an expanding field. And I should note that with Louisa County, with the solar farm going up there, they had to add a section in their zoning ordinance about that because they didn't have anything in there. It's pretty typical if a community doesn't have any of that infrastructure yet, they won't have those terms defined, and they won't have any similar use in there, because that's the key thing about zoning, is that if you have something that's relatively similar to it, you can interpret that as being a way to permit it the same as that other use. But if there's nothing even remotely similar, then you gotta address that. So they had to take the time to whip through and put something in their ordinance, put that together pretty quickly, because that was a development that was actively being pursued. And so that's the concern about zoning, is that if you know that there's stuff out there that could potentially be going on, it's always better, if possible, to be proactive, and so we don't risk having the process delayed, or even potentially losing investment that could have happened if we didn't have that. Now, it's different in our case because we don't actually have countywide zoning, whereas in the case of Louisa they do, and most likely it would be a part of the county that's outside the 2-mile area. But through a discussion with Henry County, with their administrator, it sounds like potentially, based on the experience of these companies, potentially there could even be an issue where if for the wind specifically, if there are no regulations, there's concern on those companies' parts about doing that when there are no regulations, because what would happen if there are no regulations and they put up a wind turbine at a specific location, and then the neighbor complains, or there's concerns that arise from that, it ends up going to court, and it's unclear how to resolve that. So I think it seems kind of counterintuitive that a company would be more interested in having regulations than not, but at the same time, when we're dealing with a large piece of infrastructure, that if they can just literally put it wherever you want, there's maybe concern on their part that could cause problems, liabilities for them down the road. So potentially that would mean, are we deterring companies from investing here potentially if they don't feel comfortable going to a place where there are no regulations for that sort of thing.
Companies are always interested in regulations, especially if it disadvantages their competition.
Yeah.
Are as many windmills as there are in the state of Iowa and across the Midwest, doesn't the state have input in that? Where's the DNR? You know, like your manure disposals and all that stuff, the state came in and regulated all that stuff. So are you gonna try to duplicate all that, or?
I don't think there's much regulation from a state standpoint on wind or solar. I know I can't remember what it is, there's some kind of form I think they have to fill out with the Iowa Utility Board, is that what it is? But it's not like a regulatory type.
In terms of where they're located, the siting and the setbacks, things like that, that's all left up to local regulation for wind turbines.
Is there any advantage, because most of the ones I see are in the northern part of the state, I mean, if you're going up, heading to Minnesota or something like that, along 35, once you get up toward Mason City, up around that area, you see a lot of them. I just wondered, is there different wind patterns, I'm assuming, in the state?
I included a map in there, because that's a very recent map. I was impressed that it was nice to have a resource like that, but it sounds like it's relatively new. But you can see, if you go on that website, because the back part you can see over in the northwest quadrant of the state is where a lot of them are located. But the darker red is areas where they're recently developed, and you can see it's starting to pop up in areas in the southeast quadrant, kind of over by Grinnell, a little bit down in Missouri above Kirksville, and then there's a little piece over in McDonough County, Illinois too. So there's definitely, it seems to be little pockets of areas of whatever conditions are applicable to those wind farms. I would assume relatively level terrain, rural areas. So I would think if somewhere like this McDonough County location is feasible, then conceivably the northwest part of Des Moines, northeast part of Henry definitely has some similar characteristics there, or possibly northern Lee County. So I think there's definitely a pattern of more activity as further northwest you go in the state, but there are inroads being made in the little pockets where there are more favorable conditions elsewhere.
About 12 years ago, before my dad died, so I don't remember the exact amount of time or when that was, but it was 12, give or take, years ago. There was a company that came around and started the process of buying easements up in my neck of the woods from farmers for a wind farm. And as it was explained at that time, and there's been a lot of time since then, there is a different wind pattern they look for, and it is, you don't go very far southeast of Yarmouth before you run out of that, for them to make it productive for them to look at installation. They actually met with a lot of different people. A lot of them met with my dad, well, and I was part of it once or twice. All the way to the point they may have even actually bought some easements, but then it all fell apart. I'm sure it had to do with some other funding or something. But there was a push on this, and so one of the biggest issues with wind farms, because they generally have to go buy easements off of private landowners to space those out and have them. One of the biggest issues on wind farms is the wear and tear on the roads. I couldn't tell you how many emails in 17 years or however long it's been since it became a popular thing, where these things come in and start the process in the county, and the hundreds and thousands of dollars that they have to be willing to commit up front. The roads aren't built for their equipment, for the cranes that they're bringing in. They'll come in and actually flatten roads out with their own equipment to be able to run their stuff, haul the loads in, widen intersections, just screw stuff up because they can't make it with the cranes and with the loads and everything else. And then you're talking about hundreds, if not more, of concrete trucks for footings, and the abuse to the road system, from what I gather, is one of the biggest issues during wind farm construction. And I think there have been counties that were successful that did agreements and, you know, spelled certain things out up front, and there was costs and stipulations, and if you don't do this, then there's this cost, and I've never really pursued that research because it's never impacted so far Des Moines County, but I will tell you that it's a major factor when a wind farm comes along.
I'm familiar with some of the equipment they use.
I
They
believe
use
it.
huge equipment.
Yeah, massive stuff.
Two things just to mention real quick, and I'm not an expert in wind energy, but one thing, when you look at the map and kind of where wind farms have been, when, as Jared was saying, some of the recent developments getting more kind of in this part of the state. From my understanding, just through a few presentations, again, I'm not an expert, it's just seeing, you know, a presentation about wind industry, but there's technology with the turbines and things like that where areas like this make more sense for them to build wind farms with just how the technology has changed with the blades themselves and the turbines. But the other thing I was gonna mention to build off of Brian, I haven't done a ton of research either on ordinances, but I do remember a conversation with Joe Buffington. And he specifically mentioned one of the things in their ordinance has to do with the companies, if they do build a wind farm, basically having to either upfront a cost or pay for damage to the roadways and things like that. So, again, I'm not an expert in any of these things, but the question we're coming to is basically, is this something that we should look more into and be prepared for? So if something does come about, we're not scrambling at the last minute to put something together. And if we do it, is it apply just to a 2-mile boundary? Does it apply countywide?
The issue that comes about is how this is almost always tied to zoning. And there was, I forget, was it Palo Alto County? Yeah, I think it was up near the Minnesota border. We had talked with Eric Christensen with the Iowa State about some of these ordinance update things, and we were talking about specifically about wind and solar, and he had noted that they're one example where they did a separate, I believe they have zoning, but they did it separate from the zoning ordinance, so that was a standalone wind energy regulation ordinance, but so that's conceivably an option for a county that doesn't have countywide zoning, but at the same time, it is somewhat experimental where it hasn't been tested out in the courts, and potentially there could be legal challenges to that would not be in the county's favor. So that's the issue there, where maybe if we are considering doing something, it might be good to have it countywide, but if somehow that doesn't, if that's a risk we're not willing to take, then maybe that wouldn't work if we're separate from, just because there's relatively little precedent comparatively for handling it outside of zoning.
I was gonna mention that Bob would have more institutional memory than I do, but countywide zoning was a deal before I got here.
Oh, yeah.
And the citizens of Des Moines County didn't want it. I'm not so sure that they've changed. If the specter of that would come up again, that they would be, if it was.
And just
something
be
you were
clear, we're
gonna
not
do, if you-
proposing that or anything.
If you did it outside of that, rather than trying to, you're gonna look at a camel, what's the old saying, camel under the tents, camel's nose under the tent, something like that, once you start zoning one thing. So if, maybe it was gonna be something different, I don't know, I understand what Brian's saying, and I could, well, not only putting them up, they're gonna have to come down in a few years. They have to get a maintenance, those blades don't last forever, those, the nacelles, you know.
Kind of
those-
interesting hearing that some of the issues they ran into maintenance-wise.
Yeah, that's, they,
They're replacing a lot of blades out on the northeast part of the state right
anyway,
now.
those are several hundred feet in the air. Matter of fact, they make cranes just particularly for that job. And they're big pieces of equipment.
If you get serious about this and want to pursue this, I can easily reach out, do a statewide county engineer email and find out what counties that aren't zoned have done to address wind farms if there's such experience. If this doesn't go any further, that's fine, I won't mess with it. If you want me to look into that, I can. So.
And ultimately, that's our question too. Is this something you want us to look into more? Because we're not experts in this. We've done a little research on it, but we don't know enough about it.
And that's, as far as, and I don't know, you poke that bear again about how interested the citizens at Des Moines County would be in countywide zoning. I suspect it's not changed a whole lot.
Well, I don't think we're proposing to do
But no,
countywide zoning.
I'm just saying,
giving
saying, but if this was gonna, if you were gonna want something for, wind farms or something that would be outside of
Right.
any regular zoning, and I have no idea
I see what you're
how,
saying.
how
yeah,
that's
yeah.
working.
Right, right.
Maybe that, but it just to say, well, we're gonna start zoning for this. Well, then somebody's gonna ask, are you gonna start zoning for that?
Right.
If-
And it gets back to that Palo Alto example, because I haven't looked at it close enough, but like Jared mentioned, it was outside of their zoning ordinance, so it's, I don't know how they made the intent, but it's not a zoning-based ordinance, it's specific just to wind
If
farms.
Brian could
but-
check on that,
but
that'd
yeah.
be
They
great.
have a reason to work and to not press this subject too, because you have to remember, they have to have different types of moving permits for being able to come in and out of the county, because of the weights and everything you're talking about. So there is, while it's not what I would call strong, there is position there for the county to create issues if a company just decides they're gonna blaze their own path. I mean, they have, we do, I'm sure, hundreds of moving permits every year for minor stuff, for quarries, moving crushing equipment from, stuff like that. So when you're talking about every single site and stuff like that, there are some, and then you get into utility permits, because let's face it, they're gonna put this in, they gotta have a line that they can transmit, main transmission line. Most of those are going underground, but they go in the right of way. We do utility permits almost every day for utility companies. So there's regulatory stuff out there that it's probably in their best interest to not, if things are reasonable, to not tick off the county, because, I mean, all you do is one phone call and you'll have the Blue Boys sitting there, and those tickets get real expensive real quick. So, I mean, there's reason for both sides to work together.
Yeah, and I remember reading, and it's been a while, that there are, maybe it's before they learned to go better how to regulate, there's some of those that have been walked away from.
Well,
And
they
they're
walked
just-
away from,
They're just standing there, because it costs more to take them down than it's worth. So
Well, there's
they,
like a
the
tower or
company that
something,
own
yeah.
it just walks away from it.
Well, that, like, the only similar piece of infrastructure that our ordinance, zoning ordinance currently addresses is telecommunications towers, and I know that's something that's in there already, is the decommissioning, and make sure that if they're abandoned, that there is a procedure in place so that they don't just become a blight, they just sit there unmaintained, could potentially just fall over at any time. So that's another advantage of having some sort of out clause regulation there, that if we do have this installed in our county, it needs to be followed through on, even if it does cease to be operational someday.
It would need a bond.
Right.
Yeah.
And one other thing, in terms of zoning versus not, I think one of the key issues that probably came up in the Palo Alto example is that zoning is typically seen along the lines of where you can locate something. I'm coming in with a development proposal, I could build it here but not here. Whereas one of the main issues about, I guess it would apply to telecommunications too, but the big thing with wind infrastructure is proximity to homes or other buildings. So the risk inherent in having a very tall piece of infrastructure like that, what's the risk that creates if you're in close proximity, but both in terms of what would happen if it were somehow to fall over, but just in terms of the aesthetic impact of the blades and the traffic potentially generated by that. So I think the one thing to consider there is if it is regulated somehow outside the context of zoning, that the thing is not to say where you can and cannot build within a general area, but if you are going to build, how far does it have to be from a house, from the road, things like that, just to ensure that it's done right, it's done safely, that it doesn't intrude negatively to the property owners in that area.
I agree that would all be part of it. I guess like I said, this probably won't be very deep, but I wouldn't mind if Brian can reach out and find out any other counties that have, so we would have something to discuss or not to discuss, something concrete, because I think we need something like that where that would help. And if you could check on that Palo Alto.
Yeah, I think we can look more
This-
closely into that and get a better
This
understanding.
has been, I mean, this was a big discussion when I did land use 20 years ago.
Yeah,
That was a big discussion, because I think back then is when a lot of them were started to be built up in that northwest corner of the state and stuff, so. Yeah, it's been an issue for a long time.
And for us, I mean, the couple inquiries we have, I mean, they haven't been overly specific, but I mean, mostly kind of in that northwest kind of portion of the county is generally what I understand, so.
That's where the wind patterns make it justifiable. I mean, kind of like you said, there's pockets, and according to them, once you start, well, only once you get out of the flats and start to get to the rolling, because I'm not sure the south end of our farm was in the area, just the north end or something like that. I mean, it was, I don't remember exactly, it's been too long, but it was a subject. I mean, it was out there, and they were serious enough that they were talking money. But when it came to writing checks, I think things stopped.
Well, we can look into the Palo Alto stuff if you want to reach out
If you
to
want,
other
I can look
engineers.
countywide and see what I can come up with, that's no
See if we
problem.
come up with anything, so we have a little more, we'd have a little time on that, but, I guess the one thing is what Brian brought up, than what I remember reading over the years or something, that somebody's gonna walk away from something, you can have their name on a dotted line, but if they're out of business, you don't have anything. You would
That's
have
when you
to
need a
have a
bond or
bond.
something, yeah,
You would have to have a
yeah.
bond to take something, and it wouldn't come down much easier than it went up.
That remind you of the big piece of equipment going through the basement of the old county home?
So if you guys ain't got any questions, I'd move ahead to the changes you were talking about to the,
I guess I just had one question,
Oh,
'cause
go ahead.
we didn't talk much about solar at all,
Okay.
and I don't know if that's something else that we should look into at all, just, we did have the development in Eliza County, and I don't know of, I guess I haven't seen as much or heard much about what impacts it might have on county infrastructure, things like that, so I don't know, but is that something maybe we should at least look into anymore, and just see if there
Might
are
not hurt
concerns
to
like that?
Bring us something, so we've got it's always better to have an idea what you're talking about.
I think maybe, again, we're not experts in this, but it's just
Yeah.
something that's come up, so
Sure.
maybe we need to do a little more research and kind of bring you here's why it would make sense to have it, or we looked at it, maybe it's
Or
just
not, or
something,
you would
when
make
it
us
comes
forget.
about, we can maybe address it then,
Yeah.
I would say that solar is going to be something in Des Moines County before a wind farm ever will.
it might be. That was the phone call I got last week, was about, or regulations
What the
for,
hospital's doing out there, I mean, you don't need a wind pattern for it, all you need is open area where the sun's gonna shine.
SCC, we're talking about doing it at our office,
Yeah.
so.
And the wind blows when the clouds are covered, cloud covers out.
Yeah.
I see a lot of maintenance issues with the windmill side of things. There's so many turning parts. You see so many of the small ones that go up and they never, then they're gone, or the poles stand there and the blades are gone, and they've ran into issues with the big ones, with the blades. They're shocked at how fast they're wearing out. There's a whole section of business now that's just maintenance, where they're trying to patch fiberglass or whatever you wanna call it, and then when they're junk,
They're indestructible.
yeah, when they're junk and you give up on them, from what I gather, they're impossible to really get rid of. I'm guessing somewhere there's a big stockpile of junk blades.
Well, they've
Yeah.
discussed it at the landfill, whether or not they're gonna try to accept them or not. They're hard to get rid of.
Yeah, that's
So, I mean,
30 years
there's,
of
virtually
fiberglass.
indestructible.
Yeah.
New yard.
Have you heard anything though on a roadway impact or anything about people with, so I don't even know what all counties have them, but have you heard anything about solar side?
well, I mean,
It's a much different, because they're
It's a
not
much
bringing in big
different
cranes or anything, they're mostly ground mounted
I
and.
mean, if you go up and look at that operation in Louisa County, it's an interesting, I mean, it's a big operation, but it is completely different. I would talk to the Louisa County engineer. I know that they had an issue because of a posted bridge.
Uh-huh.
So they worked out some stipulations there, and I think they end up having, I wanna say they made them pay for some rock and stuff because of the wear and tear, and that of course is right on the edge of Wapello, so that isn't what you would call a 2-mile area.
Right.
I assume, I don't know if that was because of land availability or if that's because of easy access to the infrastructure they need to carry the voltage or whatever they're doing. I don't know. But I can ask about the wind stuff, and then if we keep going on solar, I can at least talk to Louisa County and see what they've experienced. But again, theirs is right on the edge of town. It is on a county gravel road, but it's right on the edge of town, so it won't
Which
be
side
like-
of town?
Immediately on the south side, just, you can see it from Highway 61, look to the east as you're coming into town, and you'll see what I'd call the western edge of the solar farm. What you're seeing is only a piece of it.
Okay.
It's large.
It's big. I've been up there, yeah.
Yep. Or if you're going north, there's an old truss bridge on a gravel road that you see just as you're going kind of around a curve, just as you're getting to Wapello. If you take that gravel road and go north, it brings you into the south side of Wapello.
Used to be a meat processing plant.
Right in that
Yeah.
area,
Yeah,
yes.
that's right there,
If
yeah.
you take that gravel road, you'll basically split. You'll see their working area, you'll see they have farm on both sides, so.
I got buses and stuff in there, they must be hauling
Yeah.
workers in from
It's
somewhere.
It's a site, so.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, it'd be interesting to have a little more information on some of that.
Okay. I mean, that's really all we were asking.
Yeah,
Is it
yeah,
something
yeah.
we should research more and bring you more
Yeah.
information back,
That'd
or
be
is
great.
it something we should just forget
It's something
about?
we had thought about when getting started on this, but when, knowing that it's out there, but when you're actually getting calls and actually aware of prospects that are being considered out there, that really makes it more real in your mind in terms of, don't want to waste an opportunity to at least look into what options might be for that while we're in the process of doing this. But I mean, at the same time, we are trying to get through some more basic updates to the ordinance. This does involve some more, I guess, I mean, there's other examples to model after out there, but it is a substantive change to address those when they haven't been before. So our other topic we wanted to address comes from the subdivision ordinance, in terms of, it would be an existing practice. Do we want to change that in certain ways going forward? And that is the fence regulations, which was added into the ordinance as an amendment in, I believe, '05. So that was something that came about because, as I understand it, there were concerns from township trustees about what happens when you have a subdivision where residential borders an existing farm operation. And it sounds like the initial intent was related to what we typically think of when we hear the word subdivision, which is numerous lots, say 10 or 12 lots, that you're carving up a formerly farmed parcel, and those houses all back up to the farm field. The concern being that if you don't require them to put in a fence right away, the subdivider in that instance, what happens when they've sold all 10 of those lots, they're out of the picture. Now you have 10 homes but no fence, and the neighbor is complaining. There's issues with livestock, or the people's pets get out. And the issue about that is the sheer number of landowners involved, and because the township trustees that or oftentimes referred to as the fence viewers, that's a specific responsibility that they're involved with. But given that there are oftentimes situations where you're going to have disputes between a couple of neighbors over a fence, that's the type of thing that was envisioned when that responsibility was given to the trustees. Whereas this whole subdivision thing, where you get a dozen property owners involved, that really goes beyond the scope of what they feel comfortable with addressing if it involves a more complex legal responsibility like that. So I think that's what they.
Well, to make it simple, when you have an 80, and then the guy comes in and divides it, puts your 10 lots in, and as you stand on your ground and look at the fence, the one on the right is yours.
Right, the right-hand rule.
So you have 10 people all the way along here. Mine, yours,
Yeah, 10 people.
and it's terrible.
Right.
So he says the reason the guy brought it in to start with was let the subdivider, he's the one selling those lots, he's gonna make all the
Right.
money. Let them build the damn fence and be done with it.
Right,
And,
and I believe that is a good practice to continue going forward, that it specifically puts the burden of that on the subdivider when they're being developed, so that we don't run into that issue in the future. It's taken care of as part of the subdivision process. The challenge there is that if that's being enforced to apply to minor subdivisions as well, or it potentially, based on how we have enforced that, generally, if it's gonna involve more than a couple of homes, then it would not constitute a minor subdivision. It would be a larger subdivision where that would obviously apply. But if it's a simple situation where even like there was one recently where it's an existing house that's being split off from the farm ground, what was historically a farmstead, then in situations like that, you're greatly reducing the number of parties that are involved in that dispute, and it's oftentimes it'll involve existing disputes that have gone forward between 2 or 3 property owners. In that case, the way our ordinance is worded, it makes it sound like if you don't get a signature from somebody, the adjoining property owner, that they'll either not require a fence or they'll allow a different type of fence than what our minimum standard is, then the way we have to enforce that is that you gotta put the fence up before we'll approve the subdivision. Well, this one recently, there was a backlog of months before they could get somebody in to build the fence. And the only way we were able to move forward with that is because the neighbor was willing to sign the fence waiver, which technically says we're not gonna require a fence, but they are requiring one. It's just based on a separate agreement that's outside the subdivision process. That's just because of the fact that it's gonna take so long. We don't wanna make them have to wait on the subdivision, because in that case, the person had already sold their house, they were ready to move in, it was all in progress. So in those minor subdivisions, I see this being more of a hindrance than a help because if you're only dealing with a couple of landowners, that really does seem consistent with the typical duties of the trustees in handling those fence disputes. Whereas if it's 8 or 10, maybe even 4 or 5 lots, that's multiple parties involved, a more fundamental change in the character of the use around there if you're having a bunch of high density area of homes, whereas just cutting off an existing farmhouse or putting in one new house, that just involves a small number of people, and it seems like that's much less complicated of a legal issue in terms of responsibility of that fence issue. So I think that's the one issue we're addressing, and the other topic is what the minimum standard is, because right now it is assumed that if we require a fence to be built, if no one signs the waiver, then it has to be a type 47 fence according to the Iowa DOT standard specifications, which we've looked into this. I can't find any other county that has it that way, where type 47 is the standard. And it sounds like initially, I went back and looked at the minutes when this was initially being discussed, and it sounded like initially there was some specific standards that were written into how the fence would be designed, but they decided that wasn't, that they wanted to actually point to a specific standard somewhere as opposed to having our own measurements and materials listed, and so that's why they decided upon that. And it wasn't based on what any other community was doing, it was just, we wanted to find a solution to this problem so that we latched onto that. But in practice, I don't think that's an unusual situation the way we handle it. So I think the issue there is that we need to be a little bit more flexible in terms of what the minimum standard is, as opposed to this arbitrary type 47 in any instance. Because as I said, if the neighbor refuses to sign anything, that's automatically what it has to be.
When you have the public hearing for this ordinance amendment, there'll be plenty of people here to explain all that to you.
Probably
Oh,
bring
you
Dale
guys
Oaks
covered.
out of retirement.
What?
Probably bring Dale Oaks out of
Oh,
retirement.
yeah. Poor Jeff, he got called names and everything else over this fence thing.
The reason that we landed on type 40s,
Jeff,
Jeff
Hannon.
Hannon, The reason we landed on type 47 is because we spent hours talking about fence
Yeah.
and what type and what whatever, and I simply offered up that there was a DOT standard. I don't argue that it's not a realistic fence that you're gonna see built for a typical, even a field. It's more than what you're gonna build, he's not wrong about that. But that's why that came in, was because, good Lord, we talked about vinyl, we talked about this, that, I mean, the fence conversation went forever, and it just finally kind of landed there out of exhaustion, almost, I would say. But
I would expect that most likely, in a not too distant future, that'll be handled by the state, because it's not just homeowners. Corn farmers don't care about fences. Cattle people do, livestock people do. So, and they're gonna come through and say, if it's your livestock, it's your fence. But, we'll see. You're in a dilemma. I mean,
Well, what we were gonna suggest is the state already defines different types of fence in state code. So instead of saying type 47 fence, we're basically gonna say, as long as it meets any of these definitions of fence or types of fence in state code, then that's appropriate.
yeah.
And I don't have that in
And
front of me.
the minimum standard would be tight
Tight
fence,
fence.
which would be what you would consider for keeping in livestock, and that's what would be, if they refuse to sign anything, that's what you have to do, bare minimum. But if they do, and because right now it says, if it's not type 47, they could agree to have a different type of fence installed through a written agreement, but that makes it so broad that conceivably that would be a fence that doesn't even meet the state's standard of a lawful fence. So that's why we would propose that if it's not a tight fence, then they could conceivably put in what's defined as a lawful fence under state code, which is less strict, but it would fit that definition.
you just argued against yourself. I mean, if they agree to an electric fence with one strand, they've made it easier, and so, I mean, if you're gonna reference state fence, that's fine. I think one of the issues with this whole thing is that the board has on occasion waived the fence law or fence rule when there was some unreasonable situation, and if you can refer to something else, that didn't come up as an option back then, if you can refer to something else that's still a viable fence, but a little more broad that allows for it to actually happen, I don't think that's a bad deal, but as of now, I mean, it's whether it's one lot or 10 lots, you know, this whole point was to try to protect the neighboring, farmer was what was mentioned because it was Dale Oaks, I mean, let's face it, but the neighboring property or the original part, or whatever it is.
Residents aren't good neighbors either. They've got holes in your fence and walk through it, get the basketball or whatever they've kicked over there, and leave it.
I think it'd be really a heavy lift to change the type of fence you got listed in there. Like, whatever, you know, if the landowners agree, you know, you're good with it, Zach, and I'm good with it, you know, we can put in a whatever the hell you want. Because you own the property, you can agree to that. But to change that fence in there as long as it took to get to that.
Well, I mean, it's like I said, I don't argue, in fact, I mean, I think we agreed back then, it wasn't necessarily what I would call a realistic fence. I mean, there's very few DOT standards that are based on the reality of everyday living. They're based more on a construction project and the standards that a contractor knows what they have to build. I mean, I'd be curious to see the state language, I guess, for a fence. I mean, in the end, you still want to protect the landowners for a fence. And,
Is that what we've got here,
But
359 acre,
Yep.
20 type fence,
but I don't think you want to remove the opportunity for the subdivider and the neighbor to negotiate to something less, or obviously even maybe a payment or a kindness of a waive of the fence rule, because I think that happens frequently. I still think, just from my out, we've been watching this all come along, one of the issues has been that on occasion, there's been a landowner that wasn't willing to negotiate, a neighbor that wasn't willing to negotiate at all. And I believe we ran into a situation or two where there was a ravine or something that literally made it impossible, more or less, to install a fence, and that it's been waived. And once you start that kind of flexibility, it's difficult to be consistent.
Another issue we run into is, I can't think of that guy's name here, it's just over off of 99. But,
Gerst?
yeah, Gerst, where, you know, we had neighboring property where there's already a fence. So, I guess the way we interpret that is, well, is it, if they're not willing to sign the waiver, it has to meet the current spec that we have, the DOT fence, but I mean, to me, it's like, if there's already a fence there, I didn't go inspect it, but it was almost like the neighboring property owner was using the fence waiver as leverage just to get a new fence put in.
One reason that this
And
definitely
it's
needs
like,
to
is
be.
that really,
Anytime you got something like that, somebody wants to take advantage of somebody that they don't like, or just because.
Exactly, it's
they'll do it. It's like Dale, if you're gonna build something next to him, he's gonna want that fence.
I mean, you can read off this ordinance here, especially if it's not very well worded, the issue being that all they hear is, you need me to sign off or they have to do it, and they're like, okay, make them do it.
Yep. That's
And
exactly.
so if it, even in a situation like this where this isn't really the issue that applies, there's already a fence, it's just on a technicality, we're gonna make them jump through hoops to do what they need to do.
Then you're gonna have to put a clause in there where the person that's raising the fuss has livestock, or if there's some reason.
Well, maybe
You
they
know,
want
if there's
livestock
history.
later.
If there's no history,
I'm just saying you're gonna have a hard time changing
it's
that.
a book. We've
if
already.
nothing else, it needs to be clarified, because it's
Well,
not very.
and I don't have any
well
problem with being
written.
clarified or anything, you know, some of that stuff.
Yeah.
But that, and I'm well aware it's used like that sometimes, says I don't want Tom moving in next to me. I don't want a residential, you know, something like that. I
Well,
can't
the
make
key
him
thing is-
not do it, but I'm gonna make him put up the fence.
Yeah, I've seen there's a little spot out here south of town where there's just a short piece of fence. I mean, open on both ends and just a piece of fence because somebody made them put it in there, and it was a family feud, I think.
Oh.
I'm familiar with that one. But the key thing to think about going forward is that if what we're doing is, if we're interpreting this so broadly to apply to all these minor subdivisions as well as the full ones where if nobody else is doing anything like that, if that's not consistent with state code, if there's no justification for that, are we opening ourselves up at the county level to legal issues over requiring people to do things that really aren't justified in that case?
Is it illegal to do that? If it's not illegal, I don't think they can sue us.
Been in place for a while.
Yeah, so as long as, you know.
It'd be-
the
nobody's challenged it, I
board-
guess, is what it comes
it's-
down to.
It's, a board passed an ordinance, and, you know, and it was numerous public hearings, I'm sure. So if the board passed an ordinance, it's gonna be pretty tough to say, you know, you would have to prove it's unconstitutional some way.
Right. Somebody would need to step up and file a suit against the county. And they haven't done
If
so
anything else,
today.
even if it ends up in our favor, that's still time spent on legal challenges there that otherwise could be avoided. So it's just the matter of just trying to make sure what we have is accomplishes what we want, but it's not overly broad enough to the point where we're opening ourselves up to at least the nuisance of having to deal with challenges against that.
There's all sort of county ordinances across the whole nation that are a pain in the ass and of questionable value or judgment, but they're ordinances. So I don't foresee somebody taking us to court and doing something like that. I want it to be clear, you know, and like anything else, if you aren't supposed to dump trash and you're living next to your son, you aren't gonna say nothing. But if it's somebody that doesn't like it, he's gonna be on the phone. It's just a fact of life.
You know, we sit here, Tom took the brunt of the blow from couple people, you know, because accused him of being a friend to somebody and over this fence deal and that.
I didn't mind, I realized I might have a friend. I thought it was a compliment.
Things are looking up.
Jeff
You have friends, all right.
Jeff Hand took a beating over there because,
I felt sorry for Jeff.
yeah, I did, I really felt sorry for Jeff. And it was all over this fence.
Right.
And the people who put it together, you know, wanted to leave it the way it was. And they was trying to tear it apart a little bit. So I hate to see it go.
Well, I don't think we're talking about getting rid of it, we're just trying to
If
make it,
if
well,
you-
number one, make it more clear, because it's very hard to interpret, but modify it a little bit. And part of this too, we didn't really mention this, but the type of fence, I mean, that's actually, at least in one particular zoning commission member, really thinks we should change the definition of the fence type to the state, what the state code allows. So that's part of the other reasons we're getting from the commission that's giving input on this. We have a member that's saying, hey, this type of fence is
Is
way
that-
too strict.
Is that member a farmer or is that member a realtor?
Neither.
Just a person, huh?
They live out in the county in the 2-mile boundary.
No, and I wouldn't
Outside the 2 mile, just outside the 2-mile boundary. Sorry.
I wouldn't disagree with that, but from what Brian said, everything, this is a compromise that was reached after lots and lots and lots of disagreement that everybody said, well, it's a tougher fence and I think we should have to put on. The other guy says, well, I don't think we should have to let the son of a bitch live there anyway. And they've agreed on this. So, I didn't say that. I don't want to read that in the minutes.
That's recorded.
Okay. Tom said.
He's got on YouTube
I
over
know,
here.
I know.
Most of that was compromised because the state's doing it this way and
There's
so
a
let's
jump in
just
the
fall back
video
on
right
the
there.
state. We do the state rules.
Fast forward to.
I don't, I mean, I don't think it's the end of the world to look at the definition and what the fence type is. I think it'd be a mistake to try to get rid of this. I think there was a lot of
Yeah, and I don't think
discussion
we're
on
trying to
this
get rid of it.
backwards. But I think if you're gonna try that, honestly, I still go back to Dale Oaks and I almost say one would owe it to him to say, hey, Dale, we're trying to clarify this. What do you think if we were to see, and get us an input, because he came down here. To his credit, he's one of the few that's ever done it.
That's a good idea.
That's a good idea. Well, I mean, would you wanna sit through this and I know it's exciting TV, but he came down here every Tuesday for a long while.
Oh, no.
Long time.
I don't know that that's where it's going, but I understand what they're saying. I said it at the time. That fence is not a real life fence. It's like some other DOT specs. It's a fence that they came up with and we just needed something to get past that hump at the time. I don't know what the language is, but yeah. Whatever the board wants to do, I don't think it's a bad conversation, but I wouldn't commit to it till you see what other people think.
I don't think that's a bad idea, because Dale would be one of them louder.
Sure.
That, and see what he thought.
And the reason we're talking about it now is because we don't want to come to you with the ordinance with a bunch of changes and then all these people start showing up. I think we're trying to address stuff ahead of time anyway too, where we
that.
understand where you guys are comfortable with, so that we don't bring something that's gonna bring a bunch of people into this room and all riled up and.
These two guys was on the board when you made that fence thing, because I wasn't on the board yet.
I wasn't on the board.
I don't think Tom was on the board yet.
You were.
Yeah, I just wanted to finish.
Bob was.
Yeah.
Like the old Dale would sit out there with his face get beat red. Tell us how worthless we were, and I didn't expect that out of you. Of course, we've heard the same thing on Pleasant Grove Road too.
He got too worked up, but it was interesting.
Asphalt, no asphalt.
Yeah.
He's gonna have a heart attack.
Then we started arguing with us, and we were agreeing with him. He was still arguing. So, you know what we were up against. I said, Dale, we agree with you. Well,
We was mad because it was
Red,
gonna happen anyway,
It never came back.
and, so then he wanted to just get rid of it because it wasn't doing what he wanted.
Yeah.
Forgot he never came back yet.
Okay, guys, we need to wrap this up.
So I guess the direction we're getting is talk to Dale. Dale Oaks.
Can you send me that information?
I mean, I think we could,
I can try to reach out to Dale. I don't know exactly when it'll happen, but I can try to reach out to Dale and just pick his brain a little bit.
I think at the
That's probably
at the
better
very
than you
least, if
guys.
we keep the 47 standards, we at least make it clear that, I think there's even language in there about infrastructure in general, that we could bond for that ahead of time so that it's required to be complied with, but it's not something that's gonna hold up the subdivision process. I think that's important, that the responsibility is outlined, but it's not gonna hamstring everything when especially for the minor subdivisions.
You ought to remember also that the board at that point was not interested in a whole lot of people moving to the county. You know, where some people put in, tax breaks and everything for building homes in the county. And we decided not to, because we didn't want the problems that causes Ryan. And if it wasn't for the rural water, there wouldn't be mass access to the county. But
That's true.
there's, you know,
we have some data to suggest that people are still building and moving out in the county.
No, they are, but Bob's right. If rural water wasn't there,
Yeah.
because of drilling wells and the cost and the regulations and everything else, it would be a different animal. People have their ground. If they wanna split it up, they can go through this, they can sell their ground, whether you agree with it or not. Is it a pain in the ass? Yes, it is, but it's part of life. I mean, but because people generally move out to the county and don't have a realistic expectation of what life's gonna be like.
Then you have to consider also the people that are brand new moving out to the county on these larger subdivisions more so versus the family that even if they're not a farm family, but they've lived there for a generation and it's just naturally growing in place, that the different children need a house and then they want to build around here. So that's more along what the minor subdivisions are like, where that's not necessarily encouraging more growth in the county, it's just it's just accommodating the people that already live there generations down the line.
Okay.
it's a complex issue, and I don't envy you. It's one of the things that you guys earn your money on.
Well, that's why we wanted to talk about it, because we know it's been a controversial issue, and we want to make sure that we're.
And it doesn't proceed along pure logic.
I've been trying to figure out how Zach earned his money anyway, so I'm glad Bob shed some light.
Okay, we done?
I haven't seen a paycheck, I just keep showing up.
Looks like they're finishing up, folks. Did you say you were done?